I was born during the Cold War. For most of my early life, Eastern Europe was a dark place behind an iron curtain. Remote, unknowable, and frightening. The Soviet Union was vast and sealed off. What life looked like inside was hidden, partly by a wall of propaganda and Communist Party deflections from reality, yes, but also by our own disinterest and our fear of the threat that came from the East, not just tanks and missiles, but a system, an idea, something that could come to take away what we had and how we lived. There were several political books in my parents' library, but the Gulag Archipelago was the most powerful of all, for its treatment of erasure, of individuals and their very names and personal histories, of life, of memory. I opened it when I was far too young. I didn't understand everything, but I understood enough that an entire state system had been built to pretend it could make new people, new Soviets. But mostly it made prisons to hide them, reduce them, make them obedient. Gulags. A machine of silence, erasure, subordination. Even those who survived weren't lifted up by it, only bent inwards. Another early book I read was Helmut Schmidt's Grand Strategy for the West. He described the existential reality of living in West Germany. Soviet tanks just across the border, peace a fragile construct. Orwell was with us too, always Orwell, reminding us that the nightmare was not theoretical. It could happen. It was happening. In Ireland, the fear took on a strange religious twist. I remember hearing that the world wouldn't end until the Soviet Union collapsed and its people returned to the faith they had lost. It was apocalyptic and deeply contradictory. Part of me hoped the Soviet Union would never collapse, not because I supported it, but because I wasn't quite ready for the world to meet one of the conditions for its ultimate ending. At that time, I couldn't find any connection between my world and theirs. That world was somewhere else, closed, grey, and irretrievably lost behind a wall I would never pass. It took time for that wall to come down, but it did. And when it did, I went east, gradually. First to the eastern part of the newly unified Germany, then later Poland and Ukraine, and finally to the Baltic sisters, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And having taken so long to get there, I didn't want to rush. I wanted to see what these countries were really made of, their cities, their edges, their rhythms. So I walked their cities and heartlands. Following old hiking routes, I stopped in many small places that aren't even trying to be noticed. I tried their food and followed their ways. What I found is that we flatten these places too easily. We call them the Baltics as if they were interchangeable, but they're not. Estonia speaks a language that is part of a distinct family that includes Finnish and Hungarian. Latvians and Lithuanians speak Baltic languages, though they are not close enough to be easily understood by each other. Estonia looks north, toward Finland and Sweden. Lithuania feels Central European. Latvia, as ever, is suspended between its neighbours. The churches vary: Lutheran in Tallinn, Catholic in Vilnius, Orthodox sprinkled throughout. And yet, they share something. All three have restored their old towns with care and pride. In Tallinn, Riga, and Vilnius, I saw cobbled streets, merchant facades, churches and guild halls that had once been silenced, now carefully brought back to life. These weren't restorations for tourists alone. They were acts of cultural self-recognition. And it isn't just a relapse into old bourgeois customs with their own internal contradictions. They are, in any case, separate from the new bourgeois power visible elsewhere, in the malls, the globalized businesses, the fintech towers, the Uber drivers and the platform apps. The newly revived old towns are there because they have charm, human spaces that are open and inviting. I was especially struck in Riga and Tallinn by the presence of their guilds and merchant houses. As a member myself of one of the guilds of London, and an admirer of their social, historical and charitable roles, I recognized what guilds had once meant in the Baltics. Not relics, but anchors of civic life. They were institutions of craft and trust, of status earned through skill, and of commerce embedded in community. They remind us that there was a time when doing business meant being visible and accountable, when work reflected the person and the person stood behind their work. Communism stripped that away. It erased personal ownership of success or failure. It anonymized enterprise. It replaced local trust with central control. The result was not equality, but alienation, suspicion, and the dulling of responsibility. That's why the revival of these civic and architectural traditions matters. It isn't about romanticizing the past. Honoring the past is not the same as petrifying it. The history we now remember with pride, the guilds, the merchant class, the layered architecture of local trade, was itself capable of great change. The Zeppelin hangars in Riga are a perfect example. Originally constructed during the First World War by the German military to house vast imperial airships, they were feats of industrial ambition, designed for reconnaissance and long-range warfare. But after Latvia gained independence, the structures were dismantled and ingeniously adapted into the steel skeletons of what would become the Riga Central Market, regarded as one of the most advanced and hygienic marketplaces in Europe when it opened in 1930. Each hangar was re-engineered and clad in Art Deco facades, repurposed not for conquest, but for community. Today, those same vaulted frames shelter vendors selling cheese, meat, flowers, and bread. Freedom, properly understood, is not just the absence of oppression. It is the space in which a society remembers and changes at the same time. It is the capacity to conserve memory while freely agreeing, in open exchange, to the changes that life demands. But civilization is something more. It is the tone and texture of how we use that freedom. It means parity of esteem, recognition of earned status, and the quiet insistence that our exchanges carry meaning, that they are guided by values, not merely by rules. In that sense, the revival of guild halls and public squares, of marketplaces and civic institutions, is not a retreat into the past. It is a reassertion of civilization, careful, open, and anchored in civic trust. For decades, the Soviets tried to erase what didn't fit. Merchant houses, religious buildings, German facades, bourgeois detail. Riga's House of the Blackheads was bombed in the war, then deliberately demolished by Soviet authorities in 1948. It was rebuilt only in the 1990s, not for decoration, but for memory. Tallinn's medieval heart survived despite neglect. It was never bombed, just left alone, and in that silence it endured. Vilnius suffered more. Its Baroque churches were closed or repurposed, its Jewish quarter devastated, first by the Nazis, then by Soviet indifference. But even there, something has returned. Facades have been cleaned, the churches reopened. The past is not erased, only slowly brought back into the light. I remember a small exhibition at the town hall in Kaunas, Lithuania, that explored its own history, but that seemed very European, even universal in its meaning. One panel in the exhibition said that the old town is the last place to close at night and the first to open in the morning. It is the easiest place to meet your friends, to encounter strangers, to connect with someone from another part of the city or from outside it altogether. New trends arrive or are formed here first, and from here they reluctantly make way for the next. And it's true, The old town isn't just where memory lives, it's where life comes back together. These aren't just restorations, they're acts of speech. Under the Soviet regime, fear shaped not just language but space. Public buildings were silenced. Identity was edited. Architecture was made to conform. To rebuild a guild hall that was demolished for being too bourgeois. To reconsecrate a church that had been turned into a storage facility. These aren't neutral acts. They are public sentences in the grammar of freedom. Restoration is not nostalgia. It's a way of saying, this is who we were, and we're not afraid to be it again. And as I traveled further, beyond the city centers, I began to feel something else. The landscape opened up, from the centers out through their suburbs, through industrial areas, villages, forests, rivers, flatlands, empty stretches of field and sky. And there I began to notice the differences between the urban and rural, and the older and younger generations. These divides exist in all societies, but I noticed in the Baltics an acute version of this. The older generation carries something inward, a form of discretion that's more than politeness. It's caution. They do things well, but they rarely let you know what they're thinking. They learned to survive in a system where silence was the safest form of intelligence. You can almost tell when talking to them that they're curious about a solo hiker passing through their village and that they might almost want to engage. But they're not like the easily talkative Irish or inquisitive Americans of their respective small towns. You can feel that training still in them, a kind of learned restraint. The younger generation is different. They speak English, travel freely, build apps, run trendy concept cafes. They've grown up in a digital Baltic, a European Baltic, a connected world where by some accounts, Tallinn is amongst the most digitalized cities in the world. Across the Baltics, a dense ecosystem of innovative tech companies has emerged, many now recognized as global brands. Estonia is home to Bolt, the ride-hailing app. Wise provides international money transfers, and Verith provides ID verification systems. Lithuania has produced Nord Security, creators of NordVPN, Vinted, an online clothing resale app, and PV Case, famous for their solar engineering software. Latvia is home to Printful, an online print-on-demand t-shirt app, and Localize for translation management, and Irons, a specialist in robotics for wind turbine maintenance. These companies signal not just tech success, but a post-Soviet generation building trusted tools for global markets, agile, secure, and very forward-looking. But not everything is comfortable. Right in the middle between these generations, there's a lost generation that couldn't cope with the emergence from the constrained but bearable world of Soviet-planned economies to the richer but more demanding world of modern capitalism and consumerism. Change from Soviet planning to Western capitalism came fast, and not everyone was ready for it. The trauma of that transition still lingers. In the 1990s, some towns collapsed into isolation. Jobs disappeared, networks of meaning vanished overnight. In their place came a wave of confusion, alcoholism, and in many places, violent gangsterism, a kind of Darwinian capitalism before civic structures could catch up. Some people adapted, some left, and some were left behind. Even now, there are forces that want to go backwards, not just out of ideology, but because they remember the stability, however grey, of the old world. Across the Baltics, there are still pools of pro-Russian sentiment, sometimes ethnic Russian communities who never fully integrated into the new national identity, sometimes just those who feel abandoned by the promises of modernization. These are the scars left behind by the shock of freedom, reminders that even necessary transitions carry a cost. And no one is at peace with their Jewish past. In Vilnius in particular, a city that is still able to remember its old title of Jerusalem of the North, I sensed something rare, a city beginning, cautiously, to look into the darkness of what happened, not simply with guilt or sorrow, but with a kind of reverence. Because Vilnius didn't just have a large Jewish community. By some accounts, Jews reached as much as 40% of the population before World War II, and it had become a major center for Hebrew printing, publishing, and literature. Its most outstanding scholar, known as the Vilna Gaon, almost single-handedly made Vilnius a place of global Jewish importance, contributing ideas to, and even corrections of, Talmudic texts that are still referred to today. Vilnius has made their most famous Jewish son a prominent part of their long history, even if, in doing so, they have to face the almost total annihilation of Jewish life in their country after the Nazi invasion. Over 90% of Lithuanian Jews were murdered during the Holocaust, often with local collaboration. And for those that survived, the Soviet era brought further suppression and renewed erasure of their memory and identity. Freedom and civilization allow for a renewed moral life, but demand also a renewed historical accounting, one that is emerging slowly. Lithuania is still nowhere near any full reconciliation with that part of its past, but I saw signs that it is no longer flattened into the old Soviet categories, where all suffering was made uniform, or where Baltic victimhood erased the space for Jewish specificity. In Vilnius, the memory is still uneven, still fragile, but it is being allowed to breathe. I do not think, though, that the people of the Baltic states lack the moral courage to remember, change, and grow. In part, engagement with the wider world obliges them to do so, and with distance in time, the generational separation from historic events makes the hardest part more bearable. This might be true of any people anywhere in Europe, but two specific things stand out in this context, things that show an admirable, stubborn resilience and outright demonstrations of inspiring moral courage. The first is the Hill of Crosses, just outside the northern Lithuanian town of Šiauliai. I hiked there to find a strange and unsettling place, especially at first. There's no grand design to it, no formal entrance or clear logic, just a small hill crowded with tens of thousands of crosses. Wooden ones, metal ones, carved ones, plastic ones. Some are new, some decaying. Many are personal, others are anonymous. Rosaries hang in clusters swaying in the wind, and there are names, prayers, messages, and symbols left behind by people whose reasons are not always clear. For a visitor, it can feel macabre, even disturbing. But then you begin to notice the life around it. Families walking among the crosses, a couple celebrating a wedding, children running ahead of their parents. It's not only a place of grief, but of continuity, and for the people who come, it seems to mean something very real. The history of the site stretches back to the 19th century, but it was during the Soviet period that the hill took on its deeper emotional force. Religion was forbidden. Expressions of national identity were dangerous. People could not speak openly. But some still came here, often at night, and placed a cross. Quietly, without drawing attention. They didn't protest or announce themselves. They simply marked something, perhaps a loss, or a hope, or the memory of someone no longer with them. The authorities tore the crosses down, but people came back. The hill was even bulldozed repeatedly, but it was never left empty for long. What moved them to return, again and again, is hard to describe. It was not political in the formal sense. It was not even, in every case, religious. It was something more instinctive, a need to give life and death meaning, even under the order of enforced silence. To mark that something had happened, or that someone had lived, or that something still mattered. The hill became a way of carrying what could not be spoken. It gave people a place to externalize their fear, their longing, their sense of identity, not with speeches or slogans, but with the quiet placement of a single object that could stand in for everything that couldn't be said. Over time it grew, not because people organized it, but because they needed it. In that sense, the hill is not really a monument. It is a human response to the experience of being silenced. It reflects the psychology of people who were taught not to express too much, but who still found a way to say something. And that expression, modest, anonymous, quietly stubborn, has lasted. Pope John Paul II visited the hill during his papacy, not because it was beautiful, but because he understood its meaning. It was a place that had held the line, gently, without fanfare, against the forced forgetting that totalitarianism requires, and it had done so not through power, but through repetition, through the presence of thousands of small acts that together refused to disappear. The Hill of Crosses was not yet, though, an act of open confrontation. That would have been too dangerous, and the risk of being exposed by the authorities or even by neighbors was too great. The moment for a public show of courage, unity, and defiance arrived when the cracks in the Soviet Union's power became visible. In 1989, 2 years before independence, around 2 million people from Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania stood hand in hand, forming a human chain that stretched over 600 kilometers from Tallinn to Vilnius. It was called the Baltic Way, a peaceful protest to mark the anniversary of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and to say quietly but unmistakably that these nations had not consented to being erased. Even as late as 1989, that took real courage. The Soviet Union still existed. The KGB still existed. The memory of deportations, interrogations, disappearances, all of it was still fresh. Many of the people standing in that line had lived through the consequences of speaking too openly. And only months earlier, the world had watched what happened in Tiananmen Square. No one could know how Moscow might respond. And yet they stood there, without shouting or violence, and certainly, frighteningly, without protection. Just hands linked across 3 countries, visible to the world and to the state that still ruled them. And it reminded me of something Antonio Gramsci once wrote, that we all come into a world already made, already shaped by power, and from there, we must decide whether to accept it or resist it. Anyone born after 1989 was born at the beginning of the Baltic modern era, and grew up in a new power paradigm that they not only accept but embrace. But those born earlier will have known that the long human line of the Baltic Way exposed them to authorities that had terrified them for generations. Their choice to resist was brave and inspiring. In every Baltic capital and town or village of any size, I saw Estonian and Ukrainian flags flying side by side, murals and signs of solidarity, stickers on lampposts, and permanent signs of protest near Russian embassies. This support is not performative, it's existential. They know that if Ukraine falls, or if Europe falters, they're next. They cannot go back to what they were before, a space to be bargained over, absorbed, neutralized. And they know something else. Ukraine is not being dragged westward. It is moving deliberately in a direction that it has chosen. There are those who say that the West provoked Russia by expanding NATO, by dragging Ukraine and the Baltics toward a Western orbit. There is truth to this claim, but not enough to matter. From the history that we know, and the choices that we see Balts make every day, and the risks they took when their future was on the line, and from touring their old towns and hiking their heartlands, really engaging with these people, we can see that the gravity that draws them west does not come from pressure. It comes from preference. The people of the Baltics and of Ukraine are not being dragged. They are reaching, quite clearly, for the world that they want. Not because it's perfect, but because it's freer. They want a society with greater accountability, more stable law, freedom of speech and thought, a chance to build prosperity and retain their fair share of the value of their work. In the past, they weren't offered choices. History moved over them like a tide, and there were few places to reach out to for solidarity. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania know well that their solidarity with and their advocacy of Ukraine's cause is rooted in their own deep understanding of what's at stake. The Polish poet and philosopher Czesław Miłosz, who lived and studied for years in Vilnius and later referred to it as his native city, warned that civilization fails if it is dedicated merely to its own comfort and not to its ideals of freedom. The British historian Timothy Garton Ash has written in various articles and his work Homelands that we currently live in the best Europe we've ever known in terms of peace, democracy, economic growth, and human development, but that these gains can be eroded if the ideals of the Union are not defended. The late Tony Judt might have gone further by insisting that the European project was born in the ruins of imperialism, fascism, and genocide, and that when it said never again, it wasn't supposed to be never again just for Western Europe. If we wish to lock in our comforts, we must do it by locking in and standing by our values, including the freedom of modern states to choose their own direction and the moral obligation to support them, not through neutrality and the passive effects of economic gravity. And if this is too abstract for some, let's never forget that Europe does not only have an eastern border. The continent is broad and deep, and has long forgotten its fears of attack from the Ottoman Empire or the Barbary pirates, but it will one day count on the solidarity of those who need its solidarity now. And perhaps that day, men and women from the East will be called on to defend a Western or Southern European border that they have never seen. Before leaving Riga, I went to visit the KGB museum just outside the old town. The place turned out to be as grim and soul-draining as one would expect, perhaps a mood helped by a plaque on the outside of the building stating that the State Security Agency, the KGB, had imprisoned, tortured, killed, and morally humiliated its victims in this place. The guide was a mature man who spoke with a heavy accent, but he was calm and gentle in manner, even a little paternal, as he guided a large group around the museum. We entered a network of offices, filing areas, telephone surveillance and wiretapping rooms, listening stations, and then an interrogation room with a two-way mirror and the inevitable portraits of Stalin and Lenin overlooking it. For those unfortunate citizens of Soviet Riga who were not released after interrogation, the rest of the building got darker and more frightening. Miserable cramped cells and tight prisoners' yards were already sinister enough until I got to the execution room where many people met their end and whose bodies were disappeared through a series of tunnels that allowed the KGB to deliver the dead to a nearby forest under the cover of night. Our guide spoke calmly of how he had told the history of the building many times, to many locals, to many tourists, and even to his own two sons once they were old enough to understand. He had lived through much of Latvia's Soviet era and knew firsthand what a visit to the KGB building meant to ordinary people. He paused for a moment to talk about his own life, and with a slight smile, looked at all of us to tell us what for him had been the greatest day of his life. For a moment, I imagined that he, like any man, would say that it was the day his sons were born. But surprisingly, he said that the greatest day for him was when the Soviet Union fell and Latvia recovered its long-lost independence. My immediate reaction was that this seemed patriotic, but almost disappointingly impersonal. He paused for a second, let out a little sigh with a smile, and then he settled the matter for all concerned. "It was the best day of my life," he said, "because it was the day I knew my two sons would live free."